All right, good evening. It's about 7 p.m. We're going to begin our work session, but before we do so, we do have some interviews. We have 4 candidates looking to be reappointed to the Economic Development Committee: Susan Marcus, Ken Tetzner, Henry Thayer, and Brian Smith. We're going to do a little bit of a different format tonight because there's 4 candidates seeking reappointment. We're going to ask that you all come up to the microphone, and I'll ask you sort of how your experience has been, some of the accomplishments you've had on the board, and some of the challenges you face, and we'll just sort of go down the line. If you feel comfortable. If not, we can do one by one.
It designated me to speak, but I know that's not going to be the case.
So yeah, really just tell us about your experience generally, why you wish to be reappointed, some of the accomplishments you've had on the board, and some of the challenges you face currently.
Okay. Let me just tell you, I'm the second longest serving member of the board, and I see I have the worst attendance among the 4 of us. I'm also the oldest member, so maybe you don't want to reappoint me. I don't know. But anyway, I feel as though the Economic Development Committee has become a really important voice in the community for some activities that go beyond where it was when I joined back in 2010, and I think I have contributed to that change of direction. I've pushed to have our focus be more closely attuned to economic development as opposed to business encouragement only, by recognizing the things that make this community special and trying to encourage us to invest in those things in a way that has an impact on all of the different components of living here. The challenges have been getting to those meetings all the time. I don't know, the challenges, what do we want to say about the challenges? I'd say that one of the challenges is that our mandate is a little soft. We are advisory to you, but we have trouble meeting with you. We have trouble hearing from you what you'd like us to be doing, so sometimes we're a little unclear about what our direction should be. So I'd say that's an ongoing challenge. But I have 3 other people who want to speak, and you want to get this over with, so unless you have another.
Thank you, Susan.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question?
So Ken, if you just want to talk a little bit about your experience on the EDC, some of the accomplishments you've had while on the board, and some of the challenges that you face currently.
Okay. I'm pretty new, so I'm a little wet behind the ears. I've been to about 5 meetings. I guess I took somebody else's seat as they left because I just saw it was a 3-year term, so obviously that's not the case for me. But yeah, no, I like being on it. I'm a small business owner, and when I looked at all the members, I thought it would be important. Larry's on there as well, to have somebody from the small business represent on the Economic Development Committee. Haven't really seen any problems yet. We have a lot of discussions. What I see is a lot of discussions, don't really know where they get. I'm trying to figure that out. So I'm just kind of still feeling it out, kind of see where it goes, and I guess we are the power of suggestion. Is that what it would be? We kind of just go back to you guys and suggest some things, and hopefully we get it all put together and we get some progress on it. So I know we have a couple of projects right now, so hopefully we get some headway with that. And that's all I really got right now. I haven't been there long enough to really see the ins and outs. So
Thank you, Ken. Any questions?
Hi, I'm Brian Smith, and I'm glad to be here. I think that one of our charges for economic development is to support the existing businesses in town and try to attract new businesses that we think would be a good fit for our community. Quality of life is important, I think, to most of us that live here. Do appreciate the flexibility the council has given us in some of the projects that we've been involved with, is the Saugatucket Park, and also the starting out with the 300th anniversary committee. That was something that the EDC had discussed and said, hey, guess what? Next year we're going to have an anniversary here in town. We need to get organized now. So we really appreciate the council's support for that as well, and that's going to be pretty exciting. So that's my interest in being on both committees.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Any questions?
Hi, I'm Henry Thayer. I've lived in town all my life, 70 years, and my family's been here, at least my mother's family, since 1912, and my father's family's been in South County since the 1700s. So I saw the Economic Development Commission as a wonderful opportunity, and as I started digging more and more into what our agenda was, I could clearly see that South Kingstown is a tremendous economic engine. Okay, and some of the projects that I've really enjoyed is like, we now have a Marriott Hotel up here. We have the Shepherd's Run. I took a ride through there the other day. It's really nice. Unfortunately, we have the APC building that's vacant, and hopefully we're going to do something with that. But that will be a huge challenge, because buildings in town have a big building. They have a bad habit of staying unoccupied for a long period of time, and I like to see that get turned around. Challenges, it's just a lot to do. You know, as Brian mentioned, the 300th anniversary is a mountain, but it will put us in a position, I think, at the end of the day next summer, where hopefully South Kingstown will become a tourist attraction and bring in much needed finances. The Saugatucket River is phenomenal. I never knew there was an Olmsted Park here, even though I thought I knew every square foot of land in the town. I think when I see as vice chairman, my biggest challenge is trying to make sure I've got a quorum for every meeting, so we can go ahead and conduct some business. So, I really enjoyed it. And I'd have to say that it's just been one of the most rewarding experiences I thought I could have, even though I've had the opportunity to work throughout the United States. Thanks.
Thank you all for your service. We appreciate the work you do. It's certainly valuable to the community, and you should find out tonight on reappointments. So thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, we'll turn it over to the town manager to begin the work session.
Good evening. We have a fairly lengthy agenda. I'll try to run through it as quickly and thoroughly as I can. Starting with licenses, we have one license that should be relatively easy if the vendor is here. That should go quickly. We have all the necessary documents in hand. For item 7, we do have one public hearing, and that's relative to the proposed amendments to the zoning map and zoning ordinance for South County Hospital. We will have our Director of Planning, Jamie Rabbit, will give a brief PowerPoint presentation with background for the council and the public, and we also have representatives from South County Hospital here as well, and it is a public hearing, so that'll be next on the agenda. Under communications, communication item A, which is an email from Donna David concerning real estate tax late fees. That was carried forward to this meeting from the previous meeting, and I had referred the council to a memorandum from the tax collector who was with us tonight. Essentially, What we show here for the late tax fees is there is a requirement with quarterly property tax payments that there is a late fee assessed if the payment goes beyond the end of the month of the quarter for which it's due. Quarterly payments are due on the first of the month of the quarter, and then the tax resolution does require that the payment be received by the end of that month. I was also asked to do some research with regard to comparing pre-COVID versus COVID versus where we're at now, which is, we're in a different place. I can't say we're post-COVID, but within the memorandum that was provided, our tax collector did provide data that showed a few different things. One was the penalty payments per quarter and the amounts of those, and it does appear that there was a spike in 2020 Q1 and Q2 of late payments, but then it has since dropped down in comparison. So there are some indications in the data that's been provided that there has been a return to pre-COVID data conditions in terms of the number of delinquency notices that go out, the amount of penalty payments that comes in per quarter. But I can certainly go through that in more detail during the regular session unless the council has any questions on that. Next, under communications, we have a letter from the Conservation Commission Chair, Mr. David Flanders, requesting that the Conservation Commission budget be increased from $650 to $1,300. I did have a little bit of research done on the Concom in terms of how their expenditures are made, what they're made on. What we understand is that there is an interest in being able to fund things like water quality testing, tree plantings, items like that, that in some ways is an operational function of town departments. I think there is looking back at the history of the Concom, they do have some expenditures in 2019, one expenditure to save the bay, which was the entire allocation, I believe, or the entire expenditure for that year. Training in 2020 with an expenditure of only $80, but of course that was COVID. 2021, there was $935 spent on URI Watershed Watch training. So while I do think these expenditures are valuable at this point, in light of the current budget scenario with an interest in cutting line items, it may be a heavy lift to try to double their budget. Communication item C is a resolution from the Woonsocket City Council in opposition to a Senate Bill S2557, which requires that every city in town, it would require every city in town to have a translation assistance plan in place in order to translate public meeting minutes. And they're in opposition to this because of the burden it would put on cities and towns. It's an unfunded mandate. It would require resources to move forward with putting a plan in place and then being able to effectively have translation into any language at this point. So in theory, I think the idea is good, but it is putting the onus on the cities and towns to fund it. Item E is an email from Susan Mayette requesting that the elderly property tax exemption program maximum income limit be increased. And you will notice that there is a new business item 12K on the agenda requesting an order of public notice for the purpose of increasing the income criteria for elderly tax exemptions. So that is being addressed in the council under new business items. Item G is a request. This is an annual request from the Armenian National Committee for flying the Armenian flag on April 24th to mark the anniversary of Armenian genocide. The town has done this year after year. I will just note that we recently discovered when we flew the Ukrainian flag that there is under the flag code that we cannot fly another national flag on the same halyard as the U.S. flag. Town Hall only has one flagpole. I would suggest that, again, we utilize the police station as our town facility for raising that flag, since it has the three halyards available, if the council is amenable to that. Item H is a email from Josh Daly tendering his resignation from the planning board. Item I is, there are 3 different resolutions from the town of Coventry, one in opposition to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and supporting the Rhode Island's Ukrainian-American community. There are 2 other bills on here that they wish to support. One is related to Rhode Island General Law 24/7, which is sidewalk maintenance, and there is a language added into that bill to require the state to maintain sidewalks along all state highways and be responsible for that for all state roads. The House bill partnering that does not require snow or sweeping or general maintenance. I don't know why we would be in opposition to that. It would be lovely to have that. So they're supporting that and requesting support. And the other is an act relating to waters and navigation with regard to inspection of dams and having emergency action plans in place and completed for all municipal dams and all dams within a city or town. Currently, the town of South Kingstown does have emergency action plans. They have had for years. John Schock, our public services director, has noted that this is, he has no objection to this language, and in fact, we're already there. So that is another one that makes sense in terms of supporting for the benefit of the town from a safety perspective. If there are no questions, item K is an email from Stephanie Maz concerning taxation of the Roy Carpenter's cottage properties. I did request a communication from our interim tax assessor in this regard, and what we have been advised is that the tax code does not have a provision for the time that residents occupy a house, a home, a cottage, regardless, if they're only in it for 6 months, if they're in it for 3 months, and there's no indication or there's no criteria for level of services that are rendered by the town either. Those were the 2 points that came up. It's really a state law. It's also town, it's town code, so there's really no provision to adjust the tax code based on the time spent in a home. We have other property owners who spend 6 months in South Kingstown and 6 months in Florida, so that's where that stands. We also have, along with that, is a detail on the revaluation and the tax impact analysis that was sent to the council in terms of the number of properties and where they fall within the reval and assessment range. And we can certainly go into more explanation of that if you'd like during the regular meeting. Item L is a letter from the chairman of the Waterfront Advisory Commission requesting that the town council rescind a previous letter of objection to CRMC for a particular application to construct a dock by William and Wendy Conley. And the chair will be here this evening to speak to that particular communication. You do have a letter which explains why the Waterfront Commission requested that you consider rescinding that particular objection, primarily because it becomes onerous to the applicant and the resident with what appears to be the conclusion that if it did go to a full CRMC council review, it would be permitted. And that would take another 2 months, and it would be a burden on the property owner. But our committee chair will be here this evening to speak to that. You have appointments. There is one applicant also for the 300th anniversary steering committee, John Rapport from the school department. Under new business, we have item B, which is an advisory from the harbor master with regards to the Tiverton resolution that requested support to require CRMC to have stricter notification rules for to the public for various applicants for permitting. There is an associated memorandum from the harbor master that details the commission's support of that, which would require public notice to residents who live within 1,000 feet of the applicant, and also notice in a newspaper with regard to those applications. So they're recommending affirming that particular resolution. Item C is a memo from myself with regard to the opioid settlement funds. Recently, the Attorney General's office announced a second settlement for opioid funds from Teva and Allergan, and the town is a participant in the municipal partnership with the state with regard to opioid settlement funds. Every city and town in the state is, and they are entitled to 20% of the opioid settlement funds that the state is getting. The South Kingstown is already participating in that MOU. What this MOU does is it simply amends it so that the town is on record as saying, yes, we want to continue to participate in this and expect to receive the associated allocation for the town, which is approximately $113,000. Item D is a memo from our IT director authorizing an award of contract for migration services for Office 365, which will enable the town staff to better manage remote work. It's got features beyond just Outlook, which we have now, but shared, similar to Google Docs, shared documents, team services. So this contract will allow us to just progress further in terms of technology and how we operate in the town.
Terry, I have one question about that. Can you just check the map on that? So when I click through the chart, I must be missing something. But
There is a contingency.
Right. I still don't get myself to 17.
Yes, before we get to that new business item, we'll check the math on that. And Lori's here this evening too, so we can just double check that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Items E and F are kind of partnered. Item E is a resolution to rescind an award of bid for a front mount mower, which was awarded in January, I believe. The contractor or the vendor could not get it because of supply chain issues. That's Howard Johnson's in town here. We went back out to bid, and the next resolution is to award the bid to Howard Johnson's. This is for the first one was for a 2022 tractor, which they could not get. The resolution to award is for a 2023 front mount mower. It is not expected to arrive until the beginning of next year, but we want to lock in the pricing and the trade allowance on that. Item G is an award of bid for auditing services to Clifton Larson Allen. This is the firm that currently holds the contract for our annual audits, and that this firm is the recommended firm for the 3 years going forward. And our finance director is here if there are any questions related to that. Item H is a resolution to authorize the interim town manager to enter into agreement with the Infrastructure Bank of Rhode Island, and this is to draw down on the septic loan, community septic loan program. The town is already authorized for this funding through the state. It has been for the past 20 years. It began in 2010, and it was for, I believe, a total of $1 million. Over the years, the town has been the issuer of low-interest 1% loans to community members who need to either upgrade their septic system or replace their septic systems. It's been very well received. There have been over 100 loans in the course of the past 20 years, all successfully either reimbursed or are in the process of being reimbursed, except for one low delinquent loan. But that is a beneficial program to the community. Item I is another resolution authorizing the town manager to sign an agreement with the Rhode Island Department of Human Services. This is a similar assistance program as the septic loan program. It is for federal grant funds to offer low-income household water assistance for payment of water and wastewater bills for residents of the town, eligible residents. And again, this is another one where the town has to be the contractor, and essentially what it does is it supports community members who may need assistance with paying the water and wastewater bills, and it makes the town whole in terms of these enterprise funds as well. Item J is a resolution authorizing the town manager to sign an MOU for the purchase of natural gas through the state's master price agreement. Again, this leverages a larger pool to be able to get the best pricing for natural gas for the town. And item K is a resolution authorizing an order of notice for a public hearing for the proposed amendments for the property tax exemption for elderly program. And you can see here that the recommendation is to increase the income brackets from the maximum of $39,000 to $43,251. There's also a detailed memorandum attached for the council's review, and we're looking to have a public hearing at the next council meeting on April 25th. And item L is a resolution extending the town's declaration of emergency, which was adopted at the March 15th meeting. The governor is still extending that declaration of emergency. As far as we know, he intends to extend it again. Again, it's really primarily related to eligibility for funding reimbursement for federal funds, COVID funds.
Terry,
Welcome.
any questions for the manager up here? All right, we'll take about a 2-minute recess before we begin the meeting at 7:30. Good evening. Welcome to Town Hall. It is Monday, April 11th, 7:30 p.m., our regularly scheduled Town Council meeting. First order of business is the pledge to the flag. Next on the agenda is the land acknowledgement statement, which I will read. The town of South Kingstown pays homage to the indigenous people and land in which the town is now located. Let this acknowledgement serve as a reminder of our ongoing efforts to recognize, honor, reconcile, and partner with the Narragansett tribe whose land and water we benefit from today. Next, we have the roll call, if you would, Susan.
Council President McEntee,
Here.
Council Vice President Collins,
Here.
Councilwoman Bergner, here. Councilwoman Kelso,
Here.
Councilwoman Rose,
Here.
all members are present.
Next, we have item 4, approval of previous meetings.
Motion to approve items 4A and B.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. It's going to bring us to licenses, 6A, a resolution.
Consent.
Consent agenda.
Oh, whoops.
Make a motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries. It's going to bring us to licenses, 6A, a resolution granting a victualling license to Doughboys LLC, doing business as New York Pizza of Rhode Island, of Wakefield, Rhode Island, subject to approval by the Rhode Island Department of Health and issuance of a retail sales tax permit. Application by Nabi Bai. Yep, come on up. It's all right.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us about this new business.
So Nabil's been making pizza for 35 years, and I must say we're going to have the best product in Rhode Island. As you can see, hopefully you've seen the decor that we've changed on the facade of the building, much brighter, and we hope to be an anchor of the community.
Excellent. This is an opportunity to sort of market a little more. Tell us about the offerings, the hours of operation.
Yeah, so we'll be offering pizzas, salads, eventually moving on to sandwiches, subs, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, just a great New York-style pizzeria.
Excellent. Perfect location for us.
Perfect location, right next to Brickley's.
Just opening date?
We're shooting for May 1st.
Good luck.
Thank you.
My 10-year-old wants to know if he can still buy just a slice.
Absolutely. We're going to continue with the slices.
Be a happy guy.
Yes.
Will you be offering delivery?
Yes.
And your hours? I think Deb asked. Are
In process, in the works. Depending on what the community wants and the demand, which hopefully is going to be high, it'll all depend on that.
All right, do I hear a motion?
motion to approve item
Rob Jones. Yeah.
6A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, the motion passes. Congratulations.
Thank you, guys. Look forward to seeing everybody.
It's going to bring us down to a public hearing, item 7A, a public hearing relative to proposed amendments to the zoning map and zoning ordinance relating to property located at 70 Kenyon Avenue, also known as Assessor's Plat 64-1, Lot 122. The proposed amendments would, 1, change the designation of the property on the zoning map from government and institutional GI with conditions to government and institutional GI without conditions, and 2, amend the zoning ordinance, Article 6, overlay zones, special zones, and special management districts, Section 603, government and institutional GI zone, Section 603.2, healthcare institution, as shown as Exhibit 1 attached here 2, application by South County Hospital of Kenyon Ave, Wakefield, Rhode Island. Susan, before Jamie presents, are there any things you would have to read into the record here?
Thank you. Yes, there are. There is two letters from the Director of Planning relaying the Planning Board's findings, recommending approval, and of the proposed text amendments to the zoning ordinance, providing their findings of fact and findings of consistency with the comp plan, and a second letter. These are both dated February 25th of this year, recommending approval of the zoning map amendment, again, providing their findings of fact and consistency with the comp plan and consistency with the purposes of zoning.
Thank you, Susan. Jamie, take it away. I know you have a presentation on this.
Thank you, President McEntee. If you just bear with me for one moment while I grab my notes. And thank you, members of the council, as well as the members of the public who are attending this evening. My name is Jamie Rabbit. I'm the Director of Planning in the town of South Kingstown. I've been asked by the town manager to do a brief overview of the proposed regulations. I have 14 slides to go through. I will do that in an expeditious manner, in a summary manner, to allow the applicant an opportunity, as well as the public, to participate in the public hearing. The planning board, as well as the council, received an application by the South County Hospital regarding proposed changes to Article 6 contained within the zoning regulations, specific to Section 603, which deal with government and institutional GI zones. Contained within that section is Section 603.1, which are permitted uses, Section 603.2, which functionally divides the healthcare institutional regulations into 6 functional categories, A through F. There's a definition for healthcare institutions. There's dimensional regulations, design criteria, master plan requirements, master plan contents, exemptions from parking requirements, and methodology for modifying an institutional master plan. For members of the public or to the council, this text amendment affects government institutional land. The primary location associated with this is associated with healthcare institutions. That is shown on this diagram in the circle just north of Route 1 and the Cove, and that is the present location for South County Hospital. The definition of a healthcare institute is a nonprofit hospital. And there are accessory uses to that hospital, but it is a non-profit hospital. As I mentioned, there are uses within the governmental institutional, the primary local, state, federal government lands. The majority of them are semi-public institutions. It also includes the University of Rhode Island and the subject matter tonight, South County Hospital. Section 603.1 constitutes the permitted uses within those zones, and again, the primary aspect to that is healthcare, which are the subject of the changes tonight. And again, as I mentioned, healthcare institutes are defined as non-profit hospitals. With regards to Section 603.2, healthcare institutions, subsection A, again, that includes the definition. It also stipulates and defines accessory uses in subsections A, A2, A3, A4, and those are primarily the ancillary uses to a hospital. Social service entities, psychological services, there could be outpatient services associated with the hospital, but they're all accessory to the primary use of hospital. Subsection B stipulates the dimensional regulations and design criteria. It sets the setbacks for the zone, the height requirements for the zone, the bulk and density with regards to building coverage and impervious surface coverage, parking criteria. Subsection C starts to define what an institutional master plan is. Our current regulations refer to terminology of master plan. Their proposed regulatory changes are changing the term to mean institutional master plan. The functionality of the term is the same. Within that section, it clarifies the name of the plan from master plan to institutional master plan. It also changes the permitting framework from a major land development to a development plan review. I'll go over that in a moment. The primary changes of the major land development to the DPR review changes the review process. Typically, a DPR plan review is 60 days to determine whether the application is incomplete or complete. After it's determined complete, there's 120 days to make a decision. Under the proposed process laid out by the hospital and reviewed by the planning board, it lays out a 15-day time frame for the planning department, being the administrative officer, to determine whether the application is complete. Once it's determined complete, the planning board has 90 days to review the master plan. With regards to section C, there's a slight change in the language, but the primary intent remains intact. It retains the requirement that the master plan needs to recognize orderly growth associated with the development of the healthcare institute. It retains the requirement that there has to be consistency with the town's comprehensive community plan. And one thing it does not change is the length of the plan. The current regulations are a 5-year time frame. The proposed amendment remains 5 years. Continuing on with subsection C with regards to filing requirements, prior to the expiration of any master plan and or the adoption of the new ordinance, the hospital has to apply 6 months from the ordinance adoption or 6 months prior to the expiration of a current master plan. The master plan, again, 6 months prior to expiration. It also attempts to clarify the 500-foot exemption. There is a lot of language in the existing regulation that falls in the category of gray. Our role as the planning department is to try and minimize regulatory interpretation and put categories in more black and white terminology. And this regulation attempts to do that. So it clarifies what exemptions are allowed with regards to 500 square foot additions, demolitions, or expansions. It also relates those to not just expansions or demolitions, how those expansions or demolitions affect peak hour flow, AM, PM traffic, as well as the need for additional parking. Again, you could tear down a facility of 500 square feet, but what you're tearing down, be moving that and expanding it within the hospital's footprint. So there's a net loss in building footprint, but there could be an increase in AM peak and PM peak traffic flow or a need to increase parking because of the program that the hospital is modifying. So we attempted to take that gray out and put it in a more black and white category. Again, continuing on with subsection C3. Again, the review and approval process follows the subdivision regulations as it relates to development plan review. There are no proposed changes to that. The requirements on the development plan review are 200 feet with regards to notifying your abutters as well as posting a sign, and those are identical. I have a slide coming up that talks about the 500-foot notice requirement, and I'll make one correction to that slide. Again, continuing on with subsection C4 with regards to pre-submittal public workshop. This is a proposed change in its new language. Under the proposed master plan review, there was a requirement for a public hearing under the permitting process. The hospital, in their initial text amendment, made a recommendation to have a public workshop prior to applying to the town for their master plan. The notice requirements are 500 feet. They're associated with two types of notice. Anyone within 200 feet of the hospital's property would get a certified letter. Anyone between 200 and 500 feet would just get regular first-class mail. As it relates to the public hearing requirement contained within the subdivision regulations, Article V4R and V4S, your handout that you have before you, council members, state 500 feet. It is 200 feet on that. So that would be a change to your slide that you have. Continuing on to section D, master plan content. Again, one of the primary things associated with section 4 is the existing regulations require a very hard analytical parking analysis based on pure square footages of the uses contained within the hospital and the number of employees that they have. Those are based typically on the ITE manual, which is the Institute of Traffic Engineers manual. They have a large red book which lists the types of facilities and the number of parking spaces required for those types of facilities. That's what the zoning code pulled from. It doesn't give the hospital the ability to look at their organizational structure and how they operate their hospital. So it gives them the flexibility to offer an alternative parking analysis to meet their demands, not just a number in a textbook. And again, that's contained within Section 4. Section 8 continues to require that the administrative officer, being the planning director, review any proposed new construction or demolition to make sure it's consistent and compliant with the approved/adopted master plan. So it's not just relying upon the building official or the zoning enforcement official to make that determination. There's a re-review by the administrative officer for a check and balance. Subsection E, which is a completely new section, goes into more depth about the parking management plan that can be submitted as part of the application process. Again, it's a hard number count, and also they can look at an operational needs assessment. Section 1 through 4 clarifies the exemptions required for parking as it relates to campus improvements and/or expansions. Again, every building doesn't necessarily trigger parking. If they were adding a new boiler room, it could be 5,000 square feet. Technically, it would require a change to their master plan if it wasn't contemplated. Triggers a new parking analysis when it's a boiler room. The same if they were tearing down a boiler room or taking a boiler room out because they can make it more efficient and then using half of it for something else, that could trigger a parking need or traffic circulation need. So again, we're trying to be more problematic than rigid regulatory. Section F, again, is a completely new section. Again, this is a clarification of what constitutes minor modifications to the master plan, and would require and what would trigger a new master plan to be submitted. Associated also with the text amendment is a proposed zoning map change. The reason the text amendment requires a map change is because in 2001, when the town council was faced with a prior amendment and map change, the then present council attached 6 conditions to that map change. Those six conditions were requirements that a lighting plan, construction staging, required annual update, traffic study, master plan submission requirements, and provisions for minor or major changes. Those were the conditions contained in that original approval tied to the town council. All of those items, except for number 4, which is an annual update of a traffic study every 2 years, are incorporated into the proposed changes by the hospital. So the planning board supported the recommendation of approval to the council because those items, although they're not part of a conditional approval, are now addressed within the master plan requirements in the permitting process. And that is my last slide.
Thank you, Jamie. Any questions by the members for the planning director? All right, then at this time we'll ask the representatives from South County Hospital to come up and speak.
Good evening, Mr. President and members of the council. For the record, my name is Jack Revens. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Revens and St. Pierre, and I'm here this evening representing South County Hospital. I gave to the clerk a few minutes ago a affidavit of notice and all of the green cards from the mailing that was sent to the abutters as is required by the ordinance for the public hearing this evening. The hospital would like to first thank Jamie and his team, as well as the members of the planning board, for their assistance and cooperation over many, many meetings. I think since September of last year, we've had, I think, 10 meetings, between meetings with the staff, meetings with the board, meetings with our team, to refine this ordinance, to present this to you this evening, and ask for your approval of the revised ordinance as well as the map amendments. I think Jamie very thoroughly and completely explained all of the changes that are in the ordinance, and we think they will be of great assistance to the town and the hospital, and be fairly and equitably provide proper notice to all of the neighbors for any changes that may occur on our campus. South County Hospital, I believe, is the last nonprofit, independent community hospital in Rhode Island. They have a very strong leadership team in their board of trustees. They have an excellent management team in place, and they are working very hard every day to provide the best possible care to the people of South County, and also to put the hospital on a solid financial footing so that the hospital will continue to exist for another 100+ years in this location. It's unquestionably the most important nonprofit institution in the community other than the University of Rhode Island, and it's essential that its well-being and success is nurtured and fostered, and we hope with your support and the support of all the community that you'll see fit to enact this ordinance this evening. We have a number of people from the hospital board and from the hospital management team who are present to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Any questions from the members for Jack while we have him here?
Hi.
Oh, Jack, we have a few questions for you if you could stay up here.
Certainly.
I've been able to watch a few of the planning board meetings when the hospital was there, and
Thank you.
one time, multiple meetings ago, it was discussed that perhaps the hospital would advance some of the projects ahead to be a good neighbor. One of the ones was advancing the lighting program that I know is maybe a 2-year project, but maybe trying to expedite that, because that would promote some goodwill between the hospital and the surrounding neighbors. And also, there was some conversation about continuing to be a good neighbor, to meet more consistently with the neighborhood. Could you speak to that?
Certainly. Thank you for that question, Councilman Bergner. We have agreed to move the lighting plan to the top of the list. So I know that the facilities manager has been in communication with a number of the neighbors about their concerns about lighting, and it's our top priority to get the new lighting plan implemented as soon as possible, because I know lighting was one of the major concerns, particularly for the immediate abutters to the facility, and we're working on that as we speak tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Jack?
Not sure if this is a question for you, Jack, but I'm going to put it out there. And I don't even know if it's so much a question as a concern. With the time frames cut down with the review process, I'm concerned that it doesn't give the community enough time to absorb information and to show up and voice their concerns. Another concern that I have is the abutter requirement, and maybe I'm not understanding this. Is it going from 500 to 200?
No, it's not. The abutting requirement now in your ordinance is 200 feet.
And it would be going up to 500?
No, let me, give me a second, I can clarify that. The existing ordinance only requires that the public meeting before the planning board occur after we file a new institutional master plan. The ordinance in all of its different sections requires notice to abutters within 200 feet. When the hospital proposed the changes to the ordinance, we proposed that we have to hold an additional public meeting. It's our meeting, not the town's meeting. And that meeting would be held to give the abutters an idea of what we're going to submit in the master plan and give them an opportunity to present any suggestions or comments that they may like to make before we even file with the town. And that provision of this proposed ordinance requires notice to abutters within 200 feet by certified mail, return receipt requested, and abutters between 200 and 500 feet would get notice by regular mail. So that's a new public hearing that doesn't exist under the ordinance, but it will be our meeting, it will be the hospital's meeting, it won't be a town government meeting, but it's an additional opportunity for the public to participate in the process before we even submit the institutional master plan. And secondly, the master plan is only a plan. So to back up a minute, if you don't mind, there's no other institution, there's no other facility, there's nobody else in town that this ordinance applies to. While in theory it applies to you or I, in reality we all know it doesn't. So that anytime any property owner wants to change the use of their property, wants to change the size of the buildings, the amount of parking, or this or that, they have to meet all the requirements, as you know, of the planning and zoning ordinances. And if they don't meet those requirements, they have to go to the planning board or the zoning board, or sometimes to the town council, to seek approval. So we are now subject to the existing master plan ordinance. We're proposing that we be subject to this new institutional master plan ordinance. And notwithstanding the fact that if you pass it and if the planning board adopts our master plan or approves it, they don't really adopt it, they approve it, we still have to go through all the other processes that everybody else has to go through to planning and zoning if we want to do anything on the campus that requires relief. So the hospital's actually in a worse position in terms of using their property than any other property owner in town. So, we proposed the additional meeting, but it's with Jamie suggested and the planning board suggested increasing the notice of that meeting to 500 feet, which we agreed to. But the normal notice for anything that goes before planning and zoning is 200 feet. Now, there are some towns, and I haven't checked yours, there are some towns where in an R80 or R200 zoning district, where it's 2-acre or 5-acre lots, some communities expand the notice requirement to 500 feet in large lot zoning districts. But the only notice we were required to have now is 200 feet, so that doesn't change, and they get an additional public meeting. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to your inquiry, and I hope that satisfies what you were trying to get from me.
I appreciate it. It clarifies it.
Thank you.
And I clearly feel more comfortable knowing that there is additional information or attempts to gather information from abutters as opposed to...
We want to be a good neighbor. We all recognize that the hospital is a 100-plus-year-old institution, and we recognize that there's no one who lives there who was there before the hospital was up and running. Now, certainly the hospital operation has changed somewhat over the last 20 or 30 years, but so has every other business, whether it's profit or nonprofit in the community. And the trustees and the administration are committed to, as best they can, within a residential neighborhood, be a good neighbor. So all the things that we can readily address, like lighting or other concerns, noise, lighting, things like that, we're going to redouble our efforts to do that so that those complaints don't wind up filtering into town hall, that we figure out what the issues are ahead of time and we solve them, and we're going to do our best to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Any further questions? All right, thank you, Jack.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, members of the council.
This is a public hearing. At this time, we'll invite anyone from the public who wishes to speak to come on up. We just ask that you identify yourself, and we'd like to limit you to 5 minutes. But first, Jamie Rabbit.
Thank you, President McAfee. Just to follow up on Attorney Revens' comments and Councilwoman Rose's question, we had multiple conversations at the planning board level about the length of time of the master plan and the lapse in the update to the master plan. And there was a commitment that I understood on the hospital's behalf, given the present administration and Mr. Prescott, who's here this evening, being part of that administration, to not let 5 years go by without communicating to the public, primarily the neighborhood, so that they're in essence not potentially blindsided every 5 years wondering what's going to happen next door to them. that potentially there's an annual commitment or a biannual commitment to meet as a neighborhood group with the hospital to just talk about issues within the community, issues associated with the hospital's operation. And again, to address that time frame of 90 days. If the hospital commits to a program like that, the majority of issues that are shared by the immediate neighborhood within that 500-foot bound should be addressed on an annual basis by the hospital, not waiting for a 5-year update to a master plan, but are dealt with in their normal course of business and operations. And again, the planning board was very adamant in the fact that they felt there were, they went just every 5 years, that there would be some unresolved issues that would linger. And then there would be animosity built within the neighborhood if they're only allowed to express their opinions every 5 years to the hospital. So again, the planning board made a recommendation, staff supports it, and I believe there's a potential commitment from the present hospital administration to meet more often than 5 years with the community in order to make that 90-day permitting process as smooth as possible, because if there are questions of the neighborhood, perhaps they're answered prior to the application process. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. This time I invite the public to come up and speak if you wish on this matter. If you could just please first identify yourself, and we'd like to limit you to 5 minutes. We give other people here an opportunity to speak as well.
Hi, good evening. I'm Elizabeth Scott. I live at 30 Hillcrest Road and have lived there since 1994. So I've been a long-time neighbor of the hospital, and along with many of my neighbors who are here tonight, many of whom are also have been living in their homes for a long time. So I guess I would like to start by just thanking the planning board and the planning department for the process of reviewing the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance and for allowing interested parties like the neighbors to be able to listen to the debate and to provide comment on the proposal. I think it was a good process overall, and I will say on my behalf that I am very grateful that we were allowed to, as interested neighbors, to participate in the process. The zoning ordinance amendment is overall, I do support it. I think many of you know there has not been a master plan submitted to the town in well over 10 years. They were supposed to have been submitted every 5 years. So for folks who are abutters, or even people who are not abutters, who live in the neighborhood around the hospital, it is so densely developed there that, the hospital kind of, coughs and we all sneeze, kind of thing. Like it's so close that what happens there does affect our properties. Many of us are impacted by lights that stream into our homes. We're impacted by garbage trucks that arrive at anytime between 4 and 5 to empty. The big dumpsters, we're impacted when there are other kind of maintenance activities that occur, often very early in the morning. So we are very, very interested in what goes on there. Having a master plan that's frequently updated is really important so that we all know what to expect. I think the amendment that I am most happy about, besides the public meeting and the workshops, those are obviously the meeting with the neighbors and then being notified of the workshops and such. The other one that I think is really important is allowing for the exemption for the parking requirements. Many of you have heard me speak before about concerns about the loss of Town Farm Park. It is a community asset. It's a very small little pocket park with a playground and a ballpark that has increasingly become basically an ancillary parking area for the hospital. And so we're very concerned about losing it. And so the amendment that allows for an alternate analysis of parking needs to be done is really important. In fact, the draft master plan that was submitted by the hospital in 2021, their analysis by their consultants of their parking needs showed that they did not need additional parking, but then also did state that they were not in compliance with the zoning ordinance requirements. So that's very important that that you're allowing them to do that analysis. And I know this is not a hearing on the land swap, but I want you all to know that town park is truly a gem. And the fact that it has not been really managed as a park is just a travesty. And the fact that the town is very willing to give it to the hospital for parking is also just a shame. And not only does the neighborhood lose that little park, but it also is going to contribute to increased contaminated runoff into Point Judith Pond, which already suffers from shellfish closures and, frankly, recreational use problems where the water quality in the upper pond, it really doesn't even support paddling in certain conditions. And so it's not additional pavement that's needed, according to even the hospital's consultants. So I'll just leave it at that, and I know that will be a matter for another meeting. And again, want to thank the Planning Department and the Planning Board for allowing for a public process in revising what was a very egregious proposal by the hospital into one that we all can live with.
Thank you.
So just regarding the land swap, even though it's not on the agenda, that I know that was approved by a prior council, and I don't know that this council would support it unanimously. I agree with you about the park, and I've been following that as well, and I think we should be very mindful when we give away property, because we're never getting it back. And I do see it exactly like you do, that it's a gem and that it's in the middle of a community. And so I don't know that proposal would come forward again, would have a 5-0 vote. I can only speak for myself.
Anyone else willing to speak on the matter relative to the public hearing? Feel free to come on up.
Hello, I'm MJ Henderson. I live at 33 Hillcrest. My question to the hospital people is, when is the 5-year plan coming? We've been told it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. So when is it coming? That's what the neighbors would like to know, so then we can figure out when the hearings will be so that we will be available to participate. And that's all I have to ask. When?
Jack, you willing to respond to such requests?
Certainly, Mr. President. The ordinance provides that the plan has to be in within 6 months of the passage of the ordinance. As you know, we've seen that in the draft. It will be substantially before that, because the hospital is hoping this is going to pass and has started working on the master plan, but I don't have a date yet. My best estimate would be probably half of that time, maybe 60 to 90 days, but there are consultants involved in working with the hospital to do the plan, and a lot of times that depends on their schedules and how much work they can get done before it becomes summer in Rhode Island, when everyone tries to find every excuse they can to enjoy the beautiful weather for the 10 or 12 weeks that we have. So we hope soon, and when we do, we will have a neighborhood meeting, as the ordinance provides for, before we even submit it, to get comment and input. But I'm hoping that's within the next 90 or 100 days, but it'll depend on how quickly we get the work back from the consultants, and then for our own team to go through it and refine it and all that. But it'll be at least 90 days. It'll be less than 180. I wish I could give you an exact date, but we don't even have the ordinance approved as we sit here this evening, but we have started working on the plan. Thank you.
One question, Jack. Once the hospital has the plan in place, did I remember from the presentation a 7-day notice prior to the meeting with the
that's the requirement of the notice, right?
Okay, so you would send the notice to the folks who are asking approximately 7 days.
I'm sure we'll send it earlier than that, because I've noticed, I'm sure many of you have, that the mail doesn't arrive as quickly as it used to. So that if we sent it out on a Monday, you might not get it till Thursday. So we'll certainly make sure people have enough notice. So they'll have it. They should have it in their hands that many days ahead of time. But the mail's a little slow now. But we'll have the public meetings, and we're going to try to do that on a more regular basis, so that when people have concerns, they have somebody to talk to. And we've already given some of the neighbors the contact information for the facilities managers, so they can call directly when they have a concern about something. And we're going to try to do a better job of managing the trash pickup, and the new lighting plans and systems all have an ability to control how long they're on and how bright they are. So we're going to make sure we have a proper system so that we can dim the lights down at appropriate times when there's less traffic in the sidewalks and the parking lots and things like that, to be a better neighbor. Thank you.
Hey there, Bob Hackey. I live at 29 Sunset. Formerly lived at 54 Canyon Avenue for 11 years, which is abutting the hospital. My mother-in-law, Truth in Advertising, lives there now. Just a couple of quick points. First of all, I think as a former neighbor and as just a member of the community, I recognize, to Mr. Revan's point, we all have a stake in the success of the hospital, and we all want a strong institution. As a former neighbor, however, the hospital is unlike pretty much any business in this town. It runs 24/7. We have all sorts of vehicles, helicopters, other things that are not typical for most businesses, and it's in a residential neighborhood. And to Ms. Scott's point, a densely packed residential neighborhood. And so while none of us, moved in without the knowledge that we were moving in near a hospital, I think for me the most important thing is that whatever we do, we should maximize not just opportunities for public participation. And I appreciate the hospital is going to meet with neighbors, but for me, as someone who went to many of those meetings in the past, I think it's different coming to a setting like this, coming to a planning board, coming to a town council meeting, where it is publicly broadcast. It's not a meeting with some, cookies in the hospital conference room with some neighbors. It's on the public record. What's said is documented, and we can hold people accountable. I'm a big believer in transparency. I think the important thing here, when we talk about things like lighting and landscaping, that's really critical for the neighborhood. It's a small neighborhood. But they're all taxpayers, and they've all lived there a long time. And I think we need to make sure that the interests and needs of the hospital are balanced with the importance of protecting those neighbors and their property values. A couple of things, I know this is probably not implicit in the plan per se, but just a couple of things to put on, a pin in for future reference. I think any type of parking modifications need to make sure that we don't dramatically increase traffic coming out of Town Farm Road. The hospital has 2 entrances. traffic should go in and out of those two entrances, not through the residential neighborhood, because that's going to directly affect residents on Dobson and on Town Farm. And I think the other issue, I appreciate the lighting amendments and changes, and I think that's really important. We worked with the hospital at the time to make sure the lighting was facing down, not out. That was important. But as Ms. Scott points out, currently the circle is essentially being used as a parking lot. Has been for some time. I don't know if that's in compliance with whatever conditions we have or not, but I personally lived through the construction of the medical office building back in the late 90s, and when the hospital does take on modifications to its physical plant, the ripple effect is felt throughout the neighborhood. And I think as we look down the road, I just want to make sure that the neighbors have opportunity for maximum input, and that the community is able to kind of see what the impact on that neighborhood is. I would agree the Town Farm Park and the Little League field are kind of a treasure. It was an important legacy in this town. That used to be the poor farm, if you will, for the town. And I think it's something that if we can't preserve it, we owe it to the neighbors to minimize the impact. The folks who were there bought their properties looking over a Little League field and looking out at Salt Pond. Many of the changes that we might be anticipating would result in them looking out on perhaps a lovely landscaped parking lot, but nevertheless a parking lot. And so as we move forward, I just beg you to kind of keep the neighborhood and those neighbors in your thoughts as you consider whatever changes you propose to make. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Feel free just to come up to the microphone. Just first identify yourself. Seeing none. Sheriff, this is going again. Anyone here interested?
Dave Cote, Wakefield. Has the decision on the playground already been made? Was that already removed?
Legal counsel, can we comment on anything related to that matter?
If it's going to be a limited response to public comment, you don't need to add it to the agenda, but if you want to discuss it substantively, I would ask that the council add it to the agenda, because it is a separate matter from the zoning ordinance amendment.
Substantively, our discussions relative to that have been held in closed executive session. As our legal counsel, do you advise us that we can comment to on this or no?
I would advise that you can that any substantive comment take place in executive session.
So let me say, you want me to comment or?
We have talked about this in public. Terry talked about it meetings ago.
I'm going to rely on our legal counsel's advice at this time. Substantively, can we comment on the question that has been posed to us?
My understanding at this time is that the matter still qualifies for discussion in executive session by the council, because it's an ongoing matter related to acquisition or disposition of property. The public can certainly comment, but council member comments should be reserved for a properly noticed executive session.
Respectfully, I don't think you were here, but Terry did speak about, there was a question about the appraisals of the land, and Terry explained where we were at, and it was in the hands of DEM. So, I mean, that was said in a public meeting. You could go.
So anything that was said in a public meeting can be reiterated. Discussions beyond that, I think, would impair the council's ability to discuss the matter in executive session in the future. And you're right, I wasn't at that meeting, so I'm not sure exactly what was said.
I suggest, sorry, Rory, that we just have Terry just give a brief update. That re-summarization from a month ago.
Sure. Terry, you want to comment on matters that you previously said publicly in a meeting?
Sure. It was a brief update in terms of the application that has been To be clear, the council authorized the application to be submitted to the state for consideration for a land swap. That was the authorization. The application was submitted. It's in the state's hands now. That's where it is. There's been no decision made. They're still gathering information.
Dave, I hope that helps answer your
Thank you. It does. So it's not a done deal. So I would stand with the citizens that doing a land swap on a playground, we shouldn't do that. This is a one-time deal, and
Dave, I would like to say this public hearing is limited to the matter at hand in 7A. If you'd like to comment on that, you can come back at comments from interested citizens. Would like to keep it narrow, specific to this. I know we have, but now that you're here.
So related to the hospital, I know we've had South County Hospital for 100 years, but there's been so many acquisitions. So I heard, to keep South County Hospital, viable. So that's all I had to say, that, someone can take over this hospital like that. So I just want to make sure we take care of Park Lane. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public like to speak on this matter? Feel free to come on up. If not, seeing no one, do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. Do I hear a motion on 7A?
Motion to approve item 7A.
Second.
The motion and a second. Any discussion?
And can that motion please reference the planning board's findings of fact with regard to consistency with the comprehensive plan?
So moved.
Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries. It's going to move us to communications, item 8A, which is an email dated March 14, 2022 from Donna David, continued from March 28, 2022 concerning real estate tax late fees. Terry, I know this is something that we had continued from the last meeting, and we wanted you to gather information for us relative to this. Do you have that information you could provide to the council?
I do. We had our tax collector provide compile data with relation to the delinquent notices that go out. There was questions about why is it that the fees are based on the entire tax amount and not just the quarter that's delinquent. That's part and parcel of our tax resolutions. You'll notice that within the data that was provided, our tax collector did go back to 2018 with pre-COVID information in terms of the number of delinquent notices that went out, the amount of penalty payments that were made, and what we show for 2021 is that it has stabilized. It did increase in 2020. There were more delinquent notices. There was a higher collection rate on the penalties. That has since leveled. But in terms of the concern about the delinquent policy, that is part of the town ordinance. That's not something that, unless the council decides they want to change the tax resolutions, that's where that's at. The other piece of this is also the amount of time. In 2020, the council did amend the tax resolution to afford more time for a quarterly payment. Quarterly payments are due on the first of the month of the quarter that they're due, and there was a 10-day grace period. In 2020, it was extended to the end of the month, or the 30th of the month. That remains in place. That did not go away in 2021. So there is that grace period. But overall, what the data shows is that it has stabilized and dropped to pre-COVID numbers, so to speak. So unless there are questions, it's really a policy decision if the council were to want to change anything.
Any questions for the mayor?
So, at the last meeting, we just talked about editing the web page to make it more clear for residents, and I think some things were done.
We did. We made a few modifications to the tax collector's page so that it was clearer in terms of when the delinquency period, or the grace period is, and when it ends for quarterly payments. So there were changes made to the website to make that clearer. We are still working on the website. There still could be, I think, better information in terms of FAQs so that when people look up that information, it's easier to understand. The tax resolutions are kind of wordy in terms of how some of the requirements are explained, so we can certainly do that.
Any more questions for the manager on this item?
Motion to place 8A on file.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, the motion carries. It's going to bring us to 8B, which is a letter dated March 14, 2022 from David Flanders, Chairman, conveying the Conservation Commission's request to increase their budget from $650 to $1,300 for fiscal year 22-23. David, you are here. Feel free to come up on this.
Hi, thanks for hearing me. Well, you know who I am. One reason we wanted the increase in the budget was to sponsor 2 of the programs that we have sponsored within the last 3 years, but only one at a time, because that's how the budget was limited. Last year, for the first time, we worked with Friends of the Saugatucket and sponsored 1 of 7 water quality testing sites on the Saugatucket River. And those cost $700 a site through the year, which is mostly just lab fees, because the work is done by volunteers who actually go out on the water and collect these samples. So we wanted to continue to sponsor one of those $700 sites. And the other program is really cool. It works with Save the Bay and our elementary school classrooms. And we did this 2 years ago and 3 years ago. What they do is go in with this big model, 3-dimensional, it's like a sandbox almost, and they talk about stormwater runoff, which is really important. And these 3rd graders soak this stuff up like a sponge. You say, well, isn't this really more of a high school topic? But oh no, these kids are amazing, and it's geared for them to teach them that. We'd be looking for $570, and that's this year's price. We'll have a $30 buffer for any kind of increases for, when they actually do connect with Save the Bay. But for West Kingston, where we have 3 classrooms involved, that's $330. And working with Matunigal, they have 2 3rd grade classrooms for $240, and that takes us up to $1,270. So we'd be seeking to have to double our $650 budget to sponsor these programs.
Thank you, David. Any questions for David?
Have you reached out to the PTOs of these schools to ask for that? Because that is definitely something that I think PTOs would be very interested in.
To my knowledge, no. I was only referring to what we've done in the past, and that's the extent of my knowledge of this. So I don't know.
I would recommend starting there, because the schools are always looking to bring stuff in like that, and the PTOs certainly have the funding to do it.
Okay.
That's what I was going to suggest as well. I think that there's lots of opportunities to bring the arts in, or literature, and this is science, and that is clearly an area of interest and importance in our community, and I think it's a need at the elementary level to really start talking about science in general. So I would go back to the PTOs. I would think all of the PTOs would fund all of that, and then you could use your budget to do some of the other things you'd like to do, because
I was going to suggest that could we at least get an increase to cover the water testing site?
But you have a budget of $650.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and so you want $700 total?
Ideally.
Terry, in the work session, you talked a little bit about some of the things that Conservation Commission's request would entail are some things that could take place within the operational budget of the town. Can you speak a little bit about that?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking to Terry Murphy.
Oh.
So I think some of the items were the water quality testing, which Mr. Flanders talked about. The town does its own water quality testing through the Public Services Department. I am unfamiliar with what the results of the water quality testing that the Concom does, that may be, there's a distinction between the two. Tree plantings, Save the Bay program, those are the things that I think the Concom was interested in. In terms of the town operational budget, I would say, maybe we talk about what the water quality testing is to see if that's something that can be either rolled into public services or somehow, part of the operational budget. If it's redundant, then we shouldn't be doing it. I don't know if it's redundant or not, but that's something that we can certainly explore. And if it is, then certainly the funding can be used for other training or educational programming.
Last year, before Friends of the Saugatucket became a 501c3, we worked through the Watershed Council, and they were the ones who organized the testing sites, and they're exclusive to the Watershed Council and now the Friends of the Saugatucket. So there is no overlap of those particular sites with the Department of Public Services.
All right, thank you, David.
Yep.
I would just like to make a motion that we, for item 8B, we refer this to town staff to get the answers to the questions we're seeking.
Yeah, fine, thanks.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. It's going to bring us to Communication C, which is a resolution adopted March 21, 2022 by the Woonsocket City Council in opposition to Senate Bill S-2557 and House Bill H-7829 entitled Mandatory Translation Services, requiring upon request translation services be provided by any public body subject to the provisions of the Open Meetings Law.
So I just have something to say about this. I think if the state wants cities and towns to provide translation services, the state should provide the translation services upon request. Every city and town is not going to have the resources or even find capable people to perform this. I just think the state should be providing these services on an as-needed basis to the towns upon request. And that's, I guess my motion would be to place this on file.
Second.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's also Google Translate. I just Googled that, and it has 109 languages and dialects. So I don't know if people could translate their own minutes, should they?
May I clarify something? I believe the legislation wouldn't apply to minutes, it would apply to meetings, because the legislation states all public bodies shall develop a translation assistance plan setting forth the steps necessary to ensure that all open meetings of said bodies shall have the proceedings accessible to an individual in a language they understand upon request, and that plan would be implemented by September 1st, 2023. So I think it's not just minutes, I think it would be real-time translation service, which certainly would be an unfunded mandate.
And I will restate, the state should be providing those services to the towns upon request.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. It's going to bring us to item E, which is an email dated March 28, 2022 from Susan Mayette requesting that the elderly property tax exemption program maximum income limit be increased. This is something we'll be taking up at 12K in new business. We want to refer to that item.
Susan here.
Is Susan in the audience?
Motion to place item 8E on file.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, the motion carries. It's going to bring us to item G, which is an email dated March 30, 2022 from Stephen Elmajian, Armenian National Committee of Rhode Island, requesting permission to fly their flag at Town Hall on April 24th to mark the anniversary of the Armenian genocide during World War I.
Make a motion to approve item 8G on the condition that the flag be flown at the public safety complex to account for the flag code.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries. It's going to bring us to item H, which is an email dated March 31, 2022 from Josh Daly, tendering his resignation from the planning board, effective immediately.
I move that we accept Josh Daly's resignation, item 8H, and we direct the town clerk to thank him for his service. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries. It's going to bring us to item I, which is resolutions adopted March 28 and April 4, 2022 by the Coventry Town Council in opposition to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and in support of Rhode Island's Ukrainian American community, in support of Senate Bill S2341 and House Bill H7384, entitled An Act Relating to Highways, Sidewalks Relative to Maintenance on State Highways, and in support of Senate Bill 2295, entitled An Act Relating to Waters and Navigation, Inspection of Dams and Reservoirs.
Make a motion endorsing all three of these resolutions, I think.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone?
I'd just say, we just passed a resolution about the Armenian genocide. I think we're witnessing a genocide occurring now in Ukraine at the hands of Russia. And it's important that we talk about these things as they're happening, as much as it is that we recognize the atrocities of the past. And so I think it's a small thing that we can do, but hopefully the world is paying attention and we can see peace come to that region.
Thank you, Abel. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries. It's going to bring us to item K, which is an email dated April 6, 2022 from Stephanie Moss concerning taxation of the Roy Carpenter's Cottage properties.
Rory, I'm just going to recuse myself from this. Okay.
Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you.
And feel free to just talk about your concerns here.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank you all for your time this evening. One clarification I'd like to make earlier when you were discussing this item, there was a statement that the tax code does not have a provision for time occupied. There's no indication for level of services. But there is, under the Vision Appraisal website, there is a 0107 land use code, which is listed as seasonal. There are also a number of properties, including 25 Mallard Drive, that's listed as seasonal. So I'm not sure where, this is the second half of my email, so I think only the first half of my email to you all was referenced under the first reading of this item. But the second half of my email, I discussed how there are, at certain times we're listed as a neighborhood, at certain times we're listed as a campground, and this is where I think this confusion is coming in. Sometimes we're listed one way, sometimes we're listed another way, and there is a problem with transparency and understanding from our end, because if we're a campground, then perhaps this seasonal designation would apply to us, but if we're a neighborhood, then that implies that we might be residential property, in which case we might have land attached to us where we would be taxed. However, we are only cottages. We do not own the land at 240 Cards Pond Road. The land belongs to Matunic Beach property. They're taxed for the land. We should only be taxed for the cottages that we own individually. So again, when we come back to the taxation of this, being taxed for the cottages, as we're being assessed for market value, we saw a drastic increase this year. My property alone went up 265%. And I wonder if this is somehow tied to a misunderstanding under Vision Appraisal, which I understand is not under your purview, and we are individually taking that up with Vision Appraisal. But I'm here tonight to discuss how you as a group consider this under the taxable purposes, considering 76% of what we pay in taxes goes towards schools that we as a seasonal property are not able to use. Our lease is covered for 168 days, which means we cannot enroll our children because we don't meet that 180-day threshold to begin with. So I went up 265%. You guys will get a really nice chunk of that, but I can't even, that's 76% of that goes towards a facility, a service that I can't even benefit from. I've got 2 kids, and you guys have a great school system. It's better than where I am in Vermont, but I can't benefit from that. So this does seem to be an issue that I'd like to hear from you on and get some clarification of when are these different designations used and what for?
Thank you. Terry, can you assist us with this? Specifically the designation of seasonal designation, how that differs, if that is something that differs from a residential, non-seasonal home?
So, first of all, I'm wondering if our interim tax assessor is here. Steve here? He's not here. So what I can share, and I don't have all the detail from Vision Appraisal, so I cannot speak to all of these questions, but in terms of campground classifications versus neighborhoods, my understanding is that some of the classification refers to trailers, so that if it's classified as a campground, there are axles on the trailers. So there's those types of criteria that make it a campground versus a neighborhood. Vision is still in the process of going through the full reval. They have not provided a final report. We realize that there have been multiple contacts from Roy Carpenter's homeowners to Vision Appraisal. There is still the process of an appeal that happens after the tax roll is certified. In the meantime, I would have to get back to the council with more detail on all of that and defer to Vision Appraisal in terms of what their basis for the assessments are. And because they're still in that process, they have not provided a final report yet.
Thank you, Terry. I just got a few questions for you. In regard to seasonal designation, does the only thing within that consist of trailers versus neighborhood would be all things non-seasonal designations? I'm trying to understand what that designation means.
I'm sorry, Council President, I don't have that detail for you this evening.
I can just add that the statement about the tax code not having a provision for seasonal occupancy, meaning the Rhode Island general laws, right? So there's no special designation under the general laws of Rhode Island which control what the town and the tax assessor can do as far as property assessment. Designations on the Vision Appraisal online website and their internal system may be more in the nature of a note, not necessarily based on something that is or isn't designated in the tax code. So it is correct that the general laws don't have a provision for seasonal occupancy. That would be taken into account in the normal valuation process and in the reflection of market value.
Thank you for that clarification. If I might ask then, regarding market value, how does one determine market value for something, a cottage that is temporarily placed in a location and separate from the location where it sits? For example, my cottage, and I say that lightly, it's 660 square feet. So you put it anywhere else, it might be considered a tiny home or a pool house, considering, depending on where you put it. Insurance values it at $80,000. Vision Appraisal at first cut this year put it at $260,800. So that's a 265% increase over the $98,000 it was the year before. And their response was it's based on sales in the area, but the sales in the area are based on the location of the land that it's on. But if you take that off of the land, I only get to leave it there yearly. I'm required to put it cemented to the ground because of insurance, because of hurricanes and its proximity to the ocean. However, I don't get to keep it there indefinitely at any point in time. And in fact, in 2014 to 2015, I had to move that house location because it was a hazard falling into the ocean. So on any given year, I have to be ready to move my personal property, which is only insured for $80,000, which now Vision Appraisal has told me is worth $280,600. So how do you, as the body that oversees Vision Appraisal, reconcile the fact that they're, in some areas, increasing 265% in 1 year?
I think that those questions should be directed to the interim assessor, and you can feel free to reach out to him because he'd be happy to explain the assessment process and what goes into market value, with the difference between insurance being, replacement value and the market value. Like, it may be true that in theory the cottage could be placed somewhere else, but the assessment is based on
the replacement cost
tied to the land.
The replacement cost, according to Vision Appraisal, is like the depreciated cost, and it's at 94% of that $260,800 value, according to Vision Appraisal. So I will, by all means, take it up with Vision Appraisal, but I'm also interested in knowing, as the body that has hired Vision Appraisal to do this, what are your measures for accountability for this group that seems to have disparities? When we pull the numbers for the Village at Potter's Pond for their appraisals that are publicly available, when we pull the numbers for Mary Carpenter's Beach, they see, on average at Roy Carpenter's Beach, we've seen this 150% increase. Mine's insane, right? Other people have gone down at the Village at Potter's Pond. Other people have seen only a 30% increase. So you, as the body that has hired them, what are your measures for accountability for this group?
One measure or safeguard is the appeals process, by which you can present a basis by which you believe the valuation that's been provided as part of the assessment is incorrect or arbitrary. And hopefully, if you do appeal, I don't know where you are in that process, or if you have, or if that has gone negatively, but hopefully there's a trend in the area of appeals for similar properties that can reflect, hopefully, on them that is arbitrary, and changes could be made as to the valuation. So that's one safeguard. Another thing, we know that because of the assessments are going up, we have to reduce the tax rate going forward to offset that, so that way we're not getting huge influxes of revenue. I understand that over a 200% increase is going to cause an increase in taxes, and I feel sorry about that, but those are just some things in place right now, and hopefully the appraisers will realize that the valuations that you're asserting now are too arbitrary, too over high, and hopefully will be changed, but that's sort of where we're at with that.
Okay. Thank you for your time. Do you have questions for me?
No, I also have questioned how they are conducting their assessments. I appreciate that you're going through the process. I'm just thinking about, the argument, well, we're only here for a certain amount of time, and I could hear people say, I've never used the police. I've never used EMS. I'd like you to reduce we don't have line items that we could say. I hear what you're saying about the anomaly, but we can't all of a sudden say, well, I didn't go to the library, so I don't want to pay the $3.
I didn't bring any of that up,
Right.
correct. It's
Yeah.
really just that it's 76%
it's
of the
weird.
schools, and I'm not allowed to use it. You have wonderful schools here. But it's an astronomical increase that is not fairly seen across other areas. I fully expect that there would be an increase. We saw, this is a beautiful place to live, and it was far out of the cities due to COVID. Who wouldn't want to be here, right? It's a wonderful place to be. Why do you think I'm here, right? This is why I'm here. I fully expect, due to inflation, that there would be an increase. But what troubles me is that when you go back to the recession and you look at tax rates due to the recession, we didn't see a bottoming out. We still paid taxes, and we didn't see a bottoming out of taxes when you looked at fair market value and a substantial number of sales, which is what's used to determine market value. What you do see currently in the determination of market value is an arbitrary number of 19 sales, the past 19 sales. Why just 19? When you look at those numbers, if you actually used the 20th sale, fair market value decreases. So why would Vision Appraisal just use 19 unless it suits their interest? When you look at the time frame of those, they actually, to get the 19th, went one more sale and went into 2020 went into 2019 instead of keeping it through 2020. If you used all of 2019 trying to say, well, we know due to COVID, things happen and people sought out the coast, they tried to get out of the cities, why don't we try to norm this? Because an average is highly skewed by even a single sale. It goes down, if you look at all, including 2019, all of it, it goes down over $15,000. So it really looks very shady that Vision Appraisal would use a substantial number of sales. For our community, it's 19. But for a different community, is a different number, is a different time range. So why would it work for the town through a recession, and why would it work for the town again, except that it's in the town's best interest?
I can't speak to the measures and the methodology specifically that the valuation experts use when they do the assessments, so I can't address your questions directly. But I'm sure we've relied on them because they're experts. Maybe there is some means to the methodology here, but I understand your concerns, and I'm with you. I feel that it sucks.
I could not agree more. The things that I've heard they've said doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm certainly not happy with when people call and try to argue in their assessments and address those things. They've gotten uneven responses. So while we can't change it right now, I'm glad that you're going to advocate for Roy's, because I just looked up your house and we can see it here. And it's just 660 square feet.
I don't even have a flush toilet.
I know.
And that costs more. That's valued at more than my home in Vermont, which is 3 times. I have 2,400 square feet in Vermont, and that's valued at higher than my house in Vermont. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So I think I'd like to make a motion on 8K to refer that to the tax assessor's office for further investigation.
I'll second, but could we get additional information, or could we also communicate on behalf of Roy's just to get some better understanding about all of those things so that we don't just rely on?
Yes, we can.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes 4-0 with 1 recusal. It's going to bring us to item L, which is a letter dated March 18, 2022, from Michael Sherry, Chairman, Waterfront Advisory Commission, requesting that the Town Council rescind their letter of objection to CRMC application file number 2021-10-024 by William and Wendy Conley to construct and maintain a residential boating facility at 194 Winchester Drive to avoid unnecessary delay to the applicant. Michael, are you here tonight?
Is to read the letter?
We've had a chance to read your letter. If you could just sort of sum it up or brief it for us here.
Sure. It's a chronic problem we have with the CRMC notices that we get, where they go ahead and give us a set of drawings from the applicant, and in those drawings we often observe these violations or potential violations to the rules supplied by CRMC to the town into the harbor management plan. At the commission level, we look at the document, see these potential violations, and make note of them. At the time we're looking at the drawing set, usually from the engineer that created them, gave them to CRMC for the application, we see that there are no observations or comments by CRMC indicating they're prepared to give variances. So that leaves us at our commission level looking at something with potential violations. In the document we receive, it says if you don't provide a response, we assume you agree with what they're doing. So that puts us in a position of having to object when we see potential violations. That opens the dialogue with CRMC, who then says, oh, well, we plan on giving out variances anyway, and we don't have to consult with you to do so. So you wind up in this kind of catch-22 situation where we object, which forces them to respond. Once we see what they're up to, we can look at the situation, and Mike Stack, the harbor master, and I went out to this particular site in December, I think it was, and we looked over the situation and what they want to do for variances. We have no problem with functionally, but they are a violation of the rules that are in a harbor management plan. So we've now agreed that they can do what they want to in the variances that they propose, but what we'd like to do, and we've asked them in the future, is to contact us directly with a discussion of the variances they would like to apply, rather than have us go through this dance of we have to object to find out what they're up to so that we can look at it, see if it fits in with the functionality of our area. And if it functionally fits, we're okay with it. So they're kind of by default asking us to agree with it by not responding, and then making us be in a position of approving it. And while we don't want to violate our rules that are provided to us by CRMC, we don't want to just give up the ghost and say, well, whatever you want to do. So right now we're in a position of objecting to anything outside the rules. That's our position. And we're asking you now, because we've looked at it and said it's okay functionally at the site, we can go ahead with their variances. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
Mike, thank you. Any questions for Mike while we have him up here?
So is it CRMC's process of looking at these applications that makes this
it's not their process of
terribly inefficient to me?
It is
CRMC doesn't come first and say, hey, they're asking for this,
right,
and we're going to approve it. We know it's outside.
Right. They don't tell us they're going to approve it. They don't notice us that here we have an application, we know it's outside these rule sets, and we're going to allow variances. They don't approach us with that saying, does that have any impact on your local knowledge?
Until post-application.
Right, until the application's out. Then when we object, then they come back and say, well, we're going to approve it anyway.
So perhaps the Waterfront Advisory Commission should be having a discussion about how to approach CRMC to change their method, right?
We've said through informal conversations that would help things out.
Yeah.
They don't seem to have any intent in doing that. Plus, us being an advisory to you guys, we can't just go ahead and represent the town directly to them.
Right.
Our only avenue is to object, facilitate the conversation, and now we're in this 30-day increment of going through you guys, back to CRMC, back to us, back to them, and it really gets cumbersome and a little ridiculous.
It is. So I think what I'm saying here is I'd like to see the Waterfront Advisory Commission come to us with a recommendation that we could then send to CRMC saying, let's try to find a way to rectify this.
We'd be happy to send that to you.
Great. And I would make a motion to approve 8L.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just assuming CRMC doesn't change their policies for us and they continue to act the way they have, best is it possible just for us to wait to object until they've made the application and then they've made this determination of whether they're going to grant variances and then object if we know that they're open to our objection?
Well, I think maybe you're a little out of sequence. We are waiting until we are notified this is the application, this is the drawing set for the application. So, and then it says, you know, you have 2 days to respond, and if you don't, you approve it. Or if you want to object, give us a substance behind your objection. So we are waiting until we are notified. We're not in advance of any information. It's our objection that precipitates the further dialogue, and it's the only way to do it. There will be a telephone conversation, usually between the harbor master and them, to elicit what's behind the scene here. So we're trying to understand what's going on so that we can object appropriately to get it on the record and in the record.
Sarah Murphy, did you have something?
Just to clarify, when an applicant applies for something like construction of a dock, CRMC takes the application, it has to be noticed publicly. That's when the town gets that notice, and there's a 30-day window. Waterfront only meets once a month, so there's this, this clock that starts ticking. That's when they get it, and then they don't have all the detail. CRMC doesn't say with the public notice, we intend to approve this unless there's any objections, and there's a deadline for when the objections have to be submitted. So if that clarifies it, I'm not sure if it does.
So this permit, months ago, we recommended and we put a resolution objecting to the dock, and now all of those concerns are okay, waived, and this resident will now be constructing a dock?
Yes.
So you have no concerns about that? Because I thought it was in the field where the town, it was in the wrong place.
No.
No?
The issues that existed, one was the regulation is you can't put a dock into a mooring field. They're designated mooring fields approved by CRMC. This particular dock was going 25 feet into the mooring field. That problem has been resolved only because there was what was sort of a ridiculous line drawn years ago that the mooring field would go 50 feet to from the shore, which the lot next to this particular lot had a dock that was already out at about 75 feet. And when they drew the original line, anytime there was no dock on a lot, they brought the plan into 50 feet for that mooring field. If there was a dock, they left it out beyond the dock 50 feet. So if you look at the town map we had Carol do, it was doing this all around the town, which doesn't make any sense. So if you owned a lot that didn't have an existing dock, now you're told you can't put a dock out there unless it's 50 feet, which gives you about an inch of water in this particular area, which isn't much use. So to give this person 2.5 feet, they have to go out to 75 feet. So now they're 25 feet into the field. That's not a problem for us functionally. That's why in the letter we had just sent before, we used the term functionally, because yes, it doesn't meet all these regulations, but the regulations don't make sense in this particular case. So we're going to propose in our harbor management plan update that we're working on now, we're going to move that line out to 100 feet in the areas that don't currently have docks, but they're entitled to have docks under their riparian rights. So in that case, they can come along and say, well, you can get a dock this long without any variance. And right now, every time somebody comes around and wants a dock where there wasn't one before the line was drawn, you got to go through the variance route, which means going through this loop every stinking time. And it wastes your time and wastes our time.
That is very helpful information. So I really appreciate that you shared that part.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mike. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, that's going to bring us to item 9, which is comments from interested citizens. At this point, feel free to come up and talk about any matter that you feel like speaking about. Just first ask that you identify yourself, and if you could, limit your speaking to 5 minutes to give others an opportunity to speak.
How you doing? My name is RJ Stamp. I'm also owner at one of 377 cottages at Warrior Carpenters. I just wanted to bring up the discrepancies. I know we went over with the staff.
Sir, if you could just put the microphone a little closer. There you go.
All right. I just wanted to focus on the discrepancies in the replacement costs that Vision has done. Just a quick analogy. You have $2,000 worth of gold. Put on this microphone that's worth $10,000. It's $12,000 microphone. Put on this $20,000 lamp. It's $22,000. Take the gold off. It's still $2,000. So what Vision has done, they changed our dwelling type. We used to be cottages for 80 years, and now all of a sudden we're a Roy Carpenter's Beach cottage. I don't know how that happens, because if I move my cottage across the street, I become a cottage again. I'm going to give you some examples. 1023 Matunic Beach Road. It's a 1,288 square foot house. It's valued at $232 per square foot. That's waterfront, and its total value is $1.6 million. Mine is a 576 square foot house, no water view. I'm about 800 feet from the water. It's $461 per square foot. 201 Middlebridge Road, 531 square foot, 200 per square foot. I've listed 10 of these on my page here, and they all average about $209 per square foot. in other towns, in Middletown, same thing. I just picked out 5 cottages, about 500 square foot each. They all come out to about 178 square foot, per $178 per square foot. It's just, why is Roy Carpenter's singled out to be this? I don't know what it is. Why we're singled out to be? We're just singled out. There's nothing else we can say about that. And there's just discrepancies. If you go a cottage across town in Mary Carpenter's Beach, it's the same thing, about $200 per square foot. It's just, why is Roy Carpenter's 150% more than everyone else in town and everyone else in the state for a cottage? We're just a cottage. I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yes, yep.
Well, my name is Martha.
Martha, if you could just
I
pull the
live in
microphone down.
South Kingstown. Can you hear me? I didn't come for these two that were talking about taxes, but it seems like that $255,000, is on my the value of my land. And you know what? It's almost as much as my taxes were. I mean, my assessment was, whenever it was a few years back. 255, that's a good number. Okay, well, the reason I'm here is because I've been on Social Security since I was 65. That's 20 years ago. And I tell you what, I don't think I would, is this too loud? I don't think I would be here if it wasn't for inflation. Now they want to make plant hamburgers and steak. Well, I tell you what, I wouldn't be 85 if I ate that crap. And I just want young people, anybody under 49 probably has no idea what I'm talking about. But you all are going to get old. And a lot of us out here don't have a pension. Or if we do, or we did, and we were sick with cancer for twice in my lifetime. And a lot of the money went to pay for bills. I took care of my mother and my father for 10 years, longer for my mother. And then I had to put her in a nursing home in South Kingstown for a couple of years. It all takes money, folks. All you people understand. Now, when you move to Florida, the state workers and the pensioners, they get big dollars. But we, the little people, are speaking up now in different areas. I'm concerned because my family wasn't one to put the old people in a nursing home and then divest. And anybody under 49, 39, they have no idea what I'm talking about. But your grandmothers and grandfathers and great-grandmothers were put in nursing homes and let the government take care of them. Well, because I knew some of those people that did it, and they were in politics. That was 30 years ago, because I've been very active since 1992. Add up the years. But I'm glad I did it. Now, my Social Security is pretty good because I worked till I was 83. And I worked at Foxwoods. I loved it. But they got rid of my department. They got rid of all of the old people because they wanted the young people to come in. Well, the young people don't want to work because they get everything free. Who's going to pay for all of you young people? And everybody's young because I'm 85, so everybody's younger than me. I found 2 more, though, recently that are celebrating 90 years old. Okay, now with inflation, you see when you get your Social Security check, They keep adding, you get a raise of 5.9%, but if you get a little Social Security gross, it brings down your amount. So what they give you at 5.9 in the government, they decide to take 7 points more away from you. That's our government. Then you get Plan A is what I'm talking about. Plan B is your supplemental in case I have to go to Boston because they're not going to cover me if I don't have the right plan. I'm fortunate now. I'm fortunate that I'm here, and I do have good doctors, and I owe a lot of my second cancer that I'm still here to South County Hospital. And I was so glad that it's going to stay because I don't want South County to be scooped up by Brown University or anybody else. Now, the real reason I'm here is with everything that I just told you, with everything that is scooped out of my gross amount of Social Security, I'm very thankful that the elderly tax, because I talked with David. Is David here tonight? No. And he knows I'm Spitfire, so I see it's going up.
I don't want to cut you off, but you are past the 5 minutes. If you just want to give someone else an opportunity to speak,
Okay.
I'll come right back up.
Okay, I'll quit. Well, I'd like it to go up a little bit more because of all the inflation. And think about it. Because I tell you what, you're all going to get there sometime if you don't move to Florida.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak at this time? Dave Cote?
I wasn't quite sure where we are, Dave Cote, Wakefield, where we are with the EMS on town property. I just want to reiterate, I think that's a great idea. And hearing Chief Craig Stanley talk about it, it gives you the most flexibility. And when collaborating with him regarding the data, he was saying how it could be used for a facility to bring in the community, to train the community. So I just wanted to state having the EMS building, however large it's going to be on town property, is a great idea.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak at this time? Any members like to speak? Deb?
Sure. So a couple of things. One, on a positive note, is that at April 22nd is Earth Day, and we won't meet before Earth Day, so I wanted to remind the community to look for events. We haven't been able to celebrate Earth Day because of COVID, but to think for opportunities for you to live a little bit more gently in the community. So I just didn't know if the town was planning anything, and maybe Terry, in your town manager report, if there's anything for you that you could share, or if you could, the town website could then promote any events that are happening, that would be helpful. It always leads to Old Tower Hill Road, and I've gotten a number of residents asking me about the little garden fences and the collect weeds, the trash. If there's anything that we can do as a community and a town to pressure, I know it's a state road, but I said it earlier too on the phone, it's a gateway to the community. We're going to start the busy season here, and it just looks kind of trashy, and people are constantly asking me, can you fix this, or can you get the trash out? Is that possible? Which kind of, go ahead.
You want me to answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything's possible. I would defer. I know annually for Earth Day there is a initiative, and it's generally through the Parks Division. Ministerial Road Neighborhood Association does a cleanup, but we can certainly look at other options. We have been in touch with DOT. As a matter of fact, it was March 15th that we were in touch with them about signage on the islands on Old Tower Hill Road, as well as the broken fences around the stormwater BMPs and the trash. So we have been in contact with them. We are requesting some kind of regular maintenance timeline from the state. Whether or not we get that is another story, and I think we'll see what we can do about either recruiting volunteers. It's a main thoroughfare too, so we need to be careful on the safety side of that as well.
So thinking about all of these things, is it possible, or I would like to have the opportunity to have the website or some way for people to let us know if they see something, report it. Like if they see something, say something, just let us know. I was driving, I saw this broken, this couch over here. I feel like people take to social media to sort of present problems, and I don't expect the town staff to be reading Facebook or whatever to say what's the issue, but if people had a way on the town website to notify you, hey, I see, trash here, or when a way to ask questions. I know they could send an email.
We get emails, we do get phone calls. They do come in, and we try to obviously address every call we get if it's within the town's purview. But we can certainly post something on the website that encourages people to call if they see something.
Either that, or I know we're going to approve possibly Microsoft 365, and there's forums in there that you can develop a repository for people to submit things. I just feel like I'd like to provide another avenue than people complaining about something on social media, to say, I didn't have to complain, I let the town know that I saw X or Y.
We can try to develop something that encourages people to share information beyond phone calls and emails. We do have the town hall email, we have the town council email, but again, the more avenues they have, the more response we'll get.
And then I know at the last meeting we approved the preliminary budget, and just a note, at that meeting, the OPEB contribution, we had budgeted $100,000, and when we asked for the town to come back for reductions, it went down by 85% to $15,000. So people wonder why that came in so high, and then they wonder what other items might be overinflated. That was an easy adjustment. It went from 100,000 to 15, and so that makes the community wonder, what else are we over budgeting, overestimating, and then can easily scale right back? Because that one was hard.
I understand what you're saying. I would say that we couldn't do that on a regular basis year over year with OPEB, even though it's beyond 100% funded. It only takes one or two, whether it's workers' compensation, whatever it might be, disability, that those payouts could be very large. So I'm not sure what you're asking on that. Is clarification on?
No, I just think it's hard for the community to understand that was, had I not said, could you look for some reductions, that placeholder would have remained 100,000, and then two weeks or at the very next meeting, it gets reduced by 85%. So I think the community wonders what other, I can't get into the weeds on every line item and say, like, what is this and what is that? But that's about, I think I look at it as trust. And so for me to go, oh, it was 100, and because we said come back with stuff, that one went down. So it just, I guess, when you look at the big picture, people wonder what else could be there, but the five of us don't know to say maybe that's overinflated by 10% or 5%. So it just, you start to extrapolate what else could be overestimated.
So
Deb, you raised great points, great questions, great discussion to have at a budget meeting, which will take place on Thursday at the public hearing. I don't think there's a need to exhaust such questions at this time. Something to consider the manager in preparation for that meeting is just posed, but I don't think this is good to just exhaust the questions at this point.
Thank you, Rory. I appreciate all of you allowing me to give some time, but those are the things I've been thinking about, and we'll be talking about them.
Thank you. All right, any other comments from council members up here? All right, that's going to bring us to the town manager's report.
Just a couple of items. I am working with the new town manager, and we have met and are going through some transitions, so we're making sure that the transition will be as seamless as possible. I wanted council to be aware of that, and he is tuned into council meetings and all information related to the town, so just wanted you to be aware of that. We have 2 public hearings coming up on the budget, April 14th and again on April 18th, which will give the public the opportunity to comment on the preliminary budget adoption. And you do have in your packets a memorandum and detail on your request for line item selections or reductions. You have that to consider for the next few days before, actually until April 25th, which is the budget adoption. Other than that, I think we've kind of touched upon everything else that I had wanted to speak about in my manager's report, unless there are any questions.
Any questions from the members? All right, seeing none, we'll move down to item 11, which is appointments.
Make a resolution to reappoint Susan Marcus, Brian Smith, Ken Tetzner, and Henry Thayer to the Economic Development Committee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes.
Make a motion to appoint John Report to the 300th anniversary committee.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. It's going to bring us to 12, new business. Item B, a resolution affirming the Town of Tiverton's Resolution 22002 requesting amendments to the Rhode Island general laws related to notification of aquaculture applications before the Coastal Resource Management Council, as further described in a memorandum from the Harbor Master / National Resources Officer to the interim town manager dated March 18, 2022.
Motion to approve item 12B.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. It's going to bring us to item C, which is a resolution authorizing the town manager to execute the First Amendment to the Rhode Island Memorandum of Understanding between the state and cities and towns receiving opioid settlement funds on behalf of the town in order to receive South Kingstown's share of opioid settlement funds as defined in the Memorandum of Understanding and as further described in the memorandum from the interim town manager to the town council dated March 31, 2022.
Motion to approve item 12C.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. It's going to bring us to item D, which is a resolution authorizing an award of contract to Hub Technical Services, LLC of Southeastern Mass for Office 365 migration services in an amount not to exceed $17,558, which includes a $2,000 contingency, as described in a memorandum from the Director of Technology to the interim town manager dated April 4, 2022.
I believe Deb had a question in the work session. Do we have an answer for that?
Yes, so I did get clarification from our IT director. The total includes, if you look at the first page of the recommendation, on-site training per day is $1,188, and that this award accounts for 5 days of on-site training, which is the equivalent of the bid award.
Thank you.
Motion to approve item 12D.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. It's going to bring us to item E, which is a resolution rescinding an award of bid originally granted on January 10, 2022 to Howard Johnson Incorporated, Kingstown Road, Peacedale, for the purchase of one 2022 front mount mower in accordance with all bid specifications in the amount of $23,000, including a trade allowance of $8,500, and as further described in a memorandum from the interim Director of Parks and Recreation to the interim town manager dated April 5, 2022.
Make a motion that we approve items 12E and F.
Well, second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, item E and F passes. Brings us to item G, which is a resolution authorizing an award of bid to the firm of Clifton Larson Allen of Cranston, Rhode Island, for audit services subject to annual review at the following rates: fiscal year 2022 audit $64,530, fiscal year 2023 audit $66,000, and fiscal year 2024 audit $67,600. As further detailed in a memorandum from the interim finance director to the interim town manager dated April 5, 2022.
Motion to approve item 12G.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries. Going to bring us to item H, which is a resolution authorizing the interim town manager to enter into an agreement with the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank to close on and draw down the remaining $100,000 in financing under the Community Septic Loan Program, as further described in a memorandum from the interim finance director to the interim town manager dated April 5, 2022.
Motion to approve item 12H.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries. It's going to bring us to item I, which is a resolution authorizing the interim town manager to enter into an agreement with the Rhode Island Department of Human Services for the town to serve as contractor to receive federal grant funds through the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program for payment of water and wastewater bills, as further described in a memorandum from the interim finance director to the interim town manager dated April 5, 2022.
Motion to approve item 12I.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So Terry, we talked about this in the work session. So how would community members know to apply to have these funds pay for their water and wastewater bills?
So they would be able to ask the tax collector, and they would apply through the town, and they have to meet certain eligibility criteria, but that's how that would work. And I just want to confirm with Rose that that is the correct process for that. And the town would then issue the, whatever that cost would be that that particular resident can't meet. And it would cover their bills. And it's also run through the community action programs as well.
So my question is, how would someone know that that program exists? Is that advertised on our website?
We will have to promote that.
So I'm happy to approve this resolution, but I would want to increase the awareness of the community that this exists. Since I didn't know that this existed, and I would refer people who are on SSI, or elderly to look to this to leverage their resources. So I'm wondering if we can put it on.
We can, and I misspoke because it's clear in Rose's memo that the applications are taken through the community action program, not through the town, so that they process the applications. But the town can still put a link to the CAP agency and make sure people are aware of it.
That's what I'm asking for. I would like for people to know that that's available as an option to them, and not, if you're not connected to the community action group, you wouldn't know to leverage in that way.
And just in addition to that, this same program, it does exist for energy and heating.
Yeah, the light heat program too.
Through CCAP, there is a low-income energy assistance program that can help with your electric, with propane, oil, whatever it might be that you use to heat your house.
So that's kind of, I knew that there was the heating assistance, but I had never heard about the water and the wastewater. So if there was a way to sort of organize some information so that if community members needed assistance, links to resources or other things on the web, that would be helpful.
Sure. I agree.
It's just not there, or if it's there, it's not easy to find.
Right.
All right, we do have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries. It's going to bring us to item J, which is a resolution authorizing the interim town manager to execute a memorandum of understanding to participate in the purchase of natural gas under the State of Rhode Island's master price agreement with a reverse auction conducted by the State of Rhode Island for the period beginning November 1, 2022, and as further described in a memorandum from the facilities superintendent to the interim town manager dated April 6, 2022.
Motion to approve item 12J.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. Bring us to item K, which is a resolution authorizing the town clerk to advertise for order of notice of public hearing relative to proposed amendments to the Town Code, Chapter 17, Taxation, Article 3, Property Tax Exemptions for Elderly Persons.
Motion to approve item 12K.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. It's going to bring us to item L, which is a resolution extending the town's declaration of emergency adopted at an emergency session on March 15, 2020, and subsequently renewed on a monthly basis as shown on Exhibit 2 attached here too.
Motion to approve item 12L.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion?
Terry, have you had to use this at all recently, the past 6, 12, 18 months?
I've never had to use it in terms of making a decision that would, then I would need to notify the council for it. No,
Thank
I
you.
haven't.
Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, Susan, can you take the roll?
Okay, but we can convene it.
Councilwoman Bergner? Did you call my name? Sorry, I'm hard of hearing. No.
Councilman Collins.
Aye.
Councilwoman Kelso.
Aye.
Councilwoman Rose.
No.
Councilman McEntee.
Aye.
The ayes have it, 3-2.
All right, that's going to bring us to the end of the agenda.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Sure? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. That brings us to the end. Thank you for everyone's time, and have a good night tonight.